I'm going to start with my drawn-out timeline, then explain how I got to it after. All of our events begin with Jasper gifting Sybil a cheap telescope 2 years ago. Which means they must have met each other sometime before that, but we don't know much about that. We then skip ahead to very close to 1 year ago, October. Sybil's looking at some stars and makes a note that there's one star she wasn't able to see, even though she could see the ones around it. She intends to ask Jasper to check with his better telescope. This is the first sighting of the visitor. A bit later in November, she notes that the blot in the sky moved. Then throughout December, she keeps track of its movement carefully, and in doing this she realizes that it's getting closer. Then in February, Jasper asks Edwin to let Sybil borrow a better telescope. In March, Sybil makes some new notes about her weird dreams and strange noises she's been hearing. Jasper reports similar dreams and weird feelings. And around this time, Sybil starts talking to Beryl at the library, eventually asking her to help as she seemed interested and the work is getting difficult. This leads to Beryl borrowing a telescope from Edwin. Shortly after these notes, but before the next month, Sybil knocks down one of the walls of her apartment and finds a mysterious set of empty rooms. She starts preparing to use this space for a planetarium. In April, Sybil notes that Beryl has been helping make a coordinate map, and Edwin is mostly just helping with equipment. And we see that at this point, Sybil, Beryl, and Jasper are all borrowing telescopes from him. Sybil's planetarium is progressing well, and she's completed making the planet discs that the player finds throughout the game. In May, Sybil's mental condition worsens drastically, and she starts repeatedly skipping sleep to keep track of the visitor's movement. She also starts to suspect that the visitor is coming here for communication purposes, and the shadows she's just started seeing are part of this. The planetarium is also mostly completed. Vincent borrows a slide projector from Edwin for his home golf game. In June, Sybil's physical mutations from the visitor become more apparent, and she connects these changes to having seen the visitor. Jasper also begins changing, but not as much, which confuses Sybil as she realizes she gave Jasper outdated coordinates when she told him to look at it. Then Sybil's mind fully falls apart, and she loses herself entirely for months. The security officer for the apartment borrows Sybil's planet discs from Edwin, and uses them to make a security system for some reason. This is kind of the weirdest part of the game's story. It really isn't explainable. Why did he do that? In July, as a result of Sybil no longer being able to track the visitor, Jasper starts to ask for help from some other sources. Jasper meets Aurelius and invites him to study the visitor with himself, Beryl, and Edwin. He also asks Edwin to take a photo of the visitor. Edwin sees the visitor through the negative of the photo and immediately gets migraines and starts to slowly transform. He writes a letter to Jasper about this, but never ends up giving it to him. In August, Edwin's transformation starts to heavily affect his mind, and he begins to have trouble speaking, no longer cooperating with the group very much. But he still manages to lend out a zoom lens to Lyle in early September. Also, shortly after Edwin stopped talking to the other astronomers, Aurelius invites his friend Aster to join them. In late September, Edwin has nearly fully transformed into the Stargazer, being only visible in darkness. And a week later, possibly still in September, but maybe in October, Sybil finally becomes lucid for the first time in months, and she comes up with a plan for the astronomers. The instructions for the ritual that she leaves for Jasper. Then she intentionally forgets as much as she can about the visitor and Jasper, for reasons that are seen in the Unity ending. Then sometime in October, the visitor finally arrives. Most of this timeline is based on Sybil's notes, with Edwin's equipment log as valuable extra data, and the times that Aurelius and Aster join are based on their dialogue. One of the harder to determine elements is the dates involved. The only real mention of a date is Edwin's equipment log. The most important notes are the planet slides being borrowed in June, which, since Sybil completed those 6 months ago, the latest the game could take place is December. Then lending a zoom lens to Lyle in September means that must have happened more than a month ago, as Edwin would have been unable to lend anything after he turned invisible. This evidence points most strongly to November, but it could be October or December. And I think it is October specifically for two reasons. First, it makes the equipment borrowing timeline line up perfectly. 7 months ago, Sybil's notes mention having already borrowed equipment from Edwin, and recently asking Beryl for help. 7 months before October is March, the month that Beryl borrows a telescope, and the month after Sybil borrowed one. If the game was any later, then Beryl would have borrowed a telescope on her own, which is maybe possible if Sybil was talking to her about this and she just decided to do that, but I think it makes most sense if it's directly because Sybil asked her to. The second reason is that if you bring Fred's torn-off face to Sybil, she'll say, "What the hell is that? A Halloween mask? That's terrifying." I don't think people will be trick-or-treating this year. Maybe somebody wished on a monkey's paw that it would feel like Halloween every night, and here we are. The trick-or-treating this year line would be very weird if Halloween had already passed, and it was November or December. So to me this line seems like an intentional hint that the game takes place in October. You could dismiss this as Sybil's memory is unreliable, and insist that Lyle had to have borrowed the zoom lens closer to 2 months ago, placing the game in November. It's a little annoying to work with the dates because they're all wobbly and non-specific. I think because the game takes place over 15 days and the descriptions don't change. Including the notes from 3 weeks ago, which doesn't make any sense. How are they still 3 weeks ago after 15 days? Now it's worth mentioning, there is art for the long weekend achievement that shows a calendar in March. I think the in-game sources very strongly point to a time between October and December, and those would be the priority of the achievement art. And I have heard from secondary sources that the achievement art wasn't a communicated design from the developer, and March was chosen because that was the month the game released in. Oh, as for what year the game takes place, I don't know, 2020? There's a lot of flip phones around for 2020, but Dan literally does an all-day IRL stream, and I don't think those ever coexisted with widespread flip phone usage. I go 2020 because it's obvious coronavirus inspiration. There's not a lot of good evidence to place a year. I think it's really funny that Aster just joined between 1 and 2 months ago and really doesn't know what's going on. Aurelius joined before him and doesn't even know about Sybil. When you talk to Beryl and Jasper, there's like this deep tragedy about Sybil that they're only willing to talk about in vague terms, but you can ask Jasper and he'll mention their group had a founder other than him. Aurelius doesn't even know that. These two are just here like hanging out, making their crazy theories about how maybe the visitor is an alien spaceship or something. While Jasper's entire life is falling apart.